DM tocmai a încărcat un videoclip despre Druid în Diablo 4, spunându-ne că el s-a jucat și varianta finală și poate să ne spună mai multe informații. Hai să ascultăm împreună să vedem ce are de spus.
I played 100 hours of the Diablo 4 Druid during the early access preview build that I
100
had
de ore.
available to me.
Destul de mult.
During that time, it was really my mission to get as far as I possibly
Înainte să încep, o să spun că și eu voi juca tot Druid în Diablo 4 și chiar sunt curios să văd ce au de spus și alți YouTuberi care totuși au reușit să joace și varianta finală a jocului chiar cu o săptămână înainte să apară acestea. Deci în momentul de față noi nu știm chiar nimic despre ea. Hai să-l ascultăm în continuare.
could with the Druid. I was mostly concerned with understanding the class, if it was going to be strong late game, and if it was as bad as they say early.
Chiar asta vreau să aflu și eu. Este un caracter bun sau doar o să ne pierdem zeci, sute de ore aflând dacă este un caracter bun druidul sau nu? Chiar sunt curios. Tocmai asta e și motivul pentru care eu chiar vreau să joc druid în Diablo 4. Hai să mergem în continuare.
So one of the things you're going to notice about the Druid is that it is very slow to begin. When you're walking around, you're a slow character. When you're attacking things, you have to build spirit generation. When you're fighting bosses, you're melee-based very often if you're doing the melee-based builds. So you're going to have to be dodging abilities. It can be difficult when you're starting out
Chiar este
the
foarte
game.
dificil.
So don't feel too bad
Aici nu
if
contrazic
your first
absolut nimic.
experience with the Druid is, I don't like this class. It's very slow. I mean, it feels
Se
slow
prea
right
poate
now.
ca unii
Like,
să Se prea poate ca unii să zică că este un caracter foarte încet. Sunt total de acord până acum cu el.
Just about to hit 22 here. I'm thinking it might be a one-shot god later on. Just see what happens, you know. Just trying to like put all my bias aside about what I believe about the game until I get to later on in the game now. That's a lot of people's experience, and it's a teeter-totter. The balance is what will come later in the game. The beginning of the Druid will feel way worse than the mid to late game.
Asta nu e un semn bun deloc. Chiar nu vreau să aud chestia asta.
Druid. Even honestly, you could beat the whole campaign and still not be enjoying the Druid. It did not get better until 55, 60, right around the mid game. A few tips for you when it comes to starting out the Druid is don't be afraid
Atât de dificil să fie, oare?
that once you get some modifiers later, you might not actually need. For instance, if you want to do a werewolf build, it's still not a bad idea.
Din câte am înțeles, Pulverize chiar este, cred că, cel mai bun skill care ți-l poate oferi încă de la început jocul. Cred că a făcut o decizie bună să-l utilizeze.
To try using the Werebear Pulverize for that enhanced overpower. This gave me some pretty good crits, and it also scaled in the late game as we talk about that.
Ăla da damage, da criticală.
So let's talk about the mid game for Druid. It's a good idea to make sure you have an understanding of what build you want to work towards. You're starting to min-max, you're starting to use resources to level up gear, you're starting to hit that level 50 so you can unlock your Paragon board. Right around the mid game, you start to see that damage per second is a combination of having the spirit to spend as well as having the damage when you do spend that spirit. And
Cam despre asta este vorba la Druid. Adică trebuie să generezi cât mai mult spirit ca tu să ai acces la toate abilitățile și inclusiv Pulverize.
If you overcommit to just, I have infinite spirit because I put all of my legendary aspects and points and all that in the spirit generation, but you never really hit very hard, that can feel quite bad. The same way hitting very, very hard like One Punch Man can feel bad if you can only do it every 10 seconds or something. The mid game for Druid is when you start to understand your character. Maybe you're starting to get a few legendaries that have some synergy. You're starting to see how the builds cohesively go together, as that's one of the cool parts about Druids. You can have a Werebear and a Werewolf build together. You can have a Storm and Werebear build. You can have a Earth and Werewolf type of build. By mid-game, around level 50, it's really time to have decided that.
Cred că, în mod normal, cam așa ar trebui să se întâmple. Cred că pe la jumătatea jocului ar trebui deja să te decizi pe ce fel de build ai vrea să mergi, pentru că și respec-urile, din câte știu eu, sunt destul de scumpe.
You will have experienced a fairly slow start, fairly slow mid game, and now going into late, it really starts to pay off in a fantastic way. So starting to get to the 60s, the 70s, going into your 80s in the Druid, know what
Level
build you want,
71.
what uniques you
Se
want to
pare că a
run,
jucat
what you're
ceva.
looking for. You're going to start to be able to recognize this item's secondaries are going to be
Da, este un unique item destul de interesant, câte pot să văd.
strong for this reason. This is when I started realizing ancestral rares can be quite good because they can have better stats than my ancestral legendaries, and then I can re-enchant them, remodify them, and try to get exactly what I want on the piece before I choose to put a legendary aspect, etc. on it. Going in the late game, I started to notice I really should have done a better job at saving all the legendary high row of the aspect consumables so that when I go to the occultist, I have those perfect rows for the perfect gear that drops. It felt like to me that the Druid came alive post 60, level 65, right around there.
De târziu? Parcă m-aș mai gândi dacă să încep sau nu. Glumesc, evident. Tot cu Druid voi juca.
Once I got the modifiers behind me by getting ancestral items from the higher world tiers, getting the better pieces of gear, getting the better legendary modifiers that I needed, that's when the class really started to open up. You're going to feel like you're clearing mobs very quickly. You're going to feel like, hey, I'm kind of tanky. And you're going to be surprised
Wow. Ăla chiar a fost un one-shot? Impresionant pentru un druid.
at your own damage. You're also going to be surprised if the damage doesn't really seem to start to fall off. Like you ramp, but it just keeps getting linear. Though a flat line, I'll be honest, it isn't exponentially, but it's a fairly linear increase of power as you go down things like the Paragon Point board.
Într-un level 71 chiar
Visually
am fost
wise,
impresionat
now
de
that
ceea
we've
ce am
talked about
văzut.
early, mid, and late game, let's talk about the visuals. The cosmetics for the Druid are insane. I mean, I'm not talking about the paid ones. I'm talking about the
Cosmeticele,
transmobs you
sincer,
get just by
chiar sunt
going ahead,
extraordinare, adică
scrapping
cel puțin
here
cât am
in-game and
jucat
salvaging it.
și
You
eu
get that in your wardrobe. And
în
all of
beta
those
și
different wardrobe
în Server
costumes
Slam
ended up being really good
chiar au
looking.
fost foarte
So for
interesante.
some reason, I was enjoying
Și din
all
ce
of
văd,
the cosmetics that I
DM
was
chiar a
running
avut
into. I could do
mult
everything
mai
from
mult de
looking like
jucat și
Goku to looking like a deer to going back to full like
chiar e foarte
fur
impresionant
skin, look like
ce
a
ne arată el aici.
barbarian basically. There was a good variety in the visuals in which I could dress my character. The visual appeal of the abilities are really fun too. You have lightning coming down, you have a hurricane storm going around, you have a big smash of a bear, you punch people. Even being a bear the entire time with the new unique chests that allow me to be a bear all of the time. Very fun, okay? In terms
Foarte
of
interesant.
voice acting, in terms of thematics of the character, outside of the visuals, they were all fitting very well. I thought the voice actor was very good. You do hear your own voice when you're going through the primary quest.
The light has come to carry you home.
Da, aici este cam discutabil, adică fiecare cred că o să trăiască pe pielea lui fiecare moment din gameplay. Din câte știu, toți youtuberii sunt sub NDA și nu pot să povestească absolut nimic despre story-ul jocului, dar da, rămâne la decizia noastră să aflăm dacă este cu adevărat așa cum marea majoritate a streamerilor observ că o spun din ce în ce mai des.
Do you not see it, friend?
And I thought the deep, kind of somber type of voice of the Druid fit very well. It also seems to fit in the thematics of Diablo 4. You're a big guy, burly, lots of code environments.
Da.
Sort of looks like some of the dudes up here in
Chiar
Alaska.
uriaș,
I
aș putea
actually kind
spune.
of bought it.
Adică
I thought it made
druidul
sense. Seemed very believable
chiar
within
pare
the
un
Diablo
barbar.
4 universe. When it comes with playing with other players, a lot of what you're going to end up doing in a party is making sure that you are crowd
Asta e un lucru
controlling
care
the
chiar
enemy, because you
îmi
have
place
this
super
constant
mult auzind despre el. Deci chiar îmi doresc să joc cât mai mult în party. Spre deosebire de Diablo 3, unde chiar puteai să faci o grămadă de chestii singur. Nu știu. În Diablo 4 chiar îmi doresc să mă joc în grupuri.
constant pulverized slam that also stuns people. So you can have a constant form of CC. You're also going to have shouts, so you're going to slow the enemy or reduce their damage, for instance. And then you also have things like sharing your cyclone armor, where you can have damage reduction on yourself, but also share it for your teammates. So it's one of the more supportive type of builds, and I have a idea that going into the late game later on, being able to have a druid constantly CC and stun things might end up being quite important. Oh, holy fucking moly, bro. Now let's talk about some drawbacks to the druid, and we've already covered the early game is slow, so I'm not going to go into that too much. What I am going to mention is that the legendary aspects, in order to actually get the druid to be fairly strong, you need everything. You need your Paragon board, but you really need a lot of legendary aspects. It wasn't until I got the full complete build that I started to feel like my build really...
Secundă. Nu pot să cred că a făcut lucrul ăsta. Are level 71 și a făcut imprint pe o armă de level 61. Și este runa de care are nevoie la finalul jocului. Cred că este cea mai mare greșeală pe care putea să o facă. Chiar a pierdut o grămadă de damage în endgame. Dar poate are noroc și o mai găsește încă o dată. Și ne arată până la finalul clipului. Hai să vedem.
Came together. So the characters that are blasting through the content at the beginning, they're going to skyrocket them a very strong start, and you're going to sit there and feel a little depressed while you watch your friends skyrocket past you with these other classes. Now, there could be certain builds in Druid that are much better early game, but I know for a fact the one that I'm playing when it was going into the late game, Werebear type of pulverized build, is very good in the late game, but it is very weak in the early. And so because of that, and the ability that you have to actually get all these different aspects to fit, and it can be very complicated not only to figure that out, but to get all of the legendary items at all of the right spots, okay? That can be a little bit discouraging. So if you feel like it's fairly complicated, don't worry, it is fairly complicated. That's one of the pitfalls of Druid. It's not just get these 3 items, equip them, go, shout and whirlwind or whatever maybe. You actually kind of need to have all the nuance of all the different pieces together. But if you like the challenge of it and you like the puzzle of it, this could actually be a benefit to you. Another thing that can be a little bit of a bummer with the Druid is it seems to have fairly good AoE and crowd control, but you seem a little bit limited on single target damage. Now maybe the companion build, if we really get the werewolves built out just right, could kind of change this, and there might be some of the storm style that could change this, or a landslide earth build, but for the most part, it seems like if you're playing like the ones that are going to be really popular, which is the shape-shifting builds like Werewolf, Werebear, those single target damage can often feel a little bit lackluster, unless you're doing like Grizzly Rage and then just ramping up with more and more criticals. Yeah, the single target damage can feel like it's going to take a little while to be able to develop, and there's probably going to be builds that are specifically more targeted at single target damage instead of the majority of them that seem to be targeted more at AoE, which really seems to be more of the specialty of the Druid, at least as far as I can tell so far. In terms of just overall enjoyability, the way it actually plays, there is a lot of repetitive motions, so you're going to be using a lot of the same ability over and over and over again when it comes to the Druid. I think this is going to, however, be par for the course when it comes to Diablo games, so I'm not going to hold that against it. But if you're actually looking for variety of gameplay, if you're looking for a good in-game, if you're looking for the opportunity to have some supportive properties when you're playing with friends, if you want something that thematically fits within the Diablo universe, like the Druid actually makes a ton of sense in the setting, in the Werebear and the Werewolf, all of that.
Da, aș spune că sunt în 100% de acord cu ce a enumerat el mai devreme. Cred că este și o chestie de gust la urma urmei. Adică, sincer, dintre toate caracterele, druidul și rogu, mie personal mi se par cele mai atrăgătoare. Bun, și barbarul are un playstyle destul de interesant, dar druidul, nu știu, se pare mult peste. Adică să te poți transforma și într-un vârcolac sau într-un urs și să poți în același timp să fii și om, chiar mi se pare foarte, foarte interesant. Cu diferite abilități, atâta timp cât ești fie transformat, fie nu, să ai abilități diferite și lucrul ăsta să te și ajute, pentru că ai și un heal în momentul când te transformi în într-un vârcolac. Bun, hai să continuăm mai departe, să vedem.
That really makes me believe the Druid in terms of like visually, sound-wise, seen in the game. It's fairly immersive, though I hate to use that word because it's an ARPG, but it does fairly fit the theme of the game. And then the actual concept of the Druid itself is, if you like these very slow investment style of characters, this might...
Ok, ia să vedem ce inel unic a primit el aici. Da, foarte interesant. Bine, atâta timp cât mergi pe build-ul de werewolf. Dacă nu îl folosești, atunci inelul cu siguranță o să fie unul inutil, dar da, e promițător. Foarte interesant. Chiar foarte interesant.
might actually be the class for you. Now at this full early access, I got all the way to level 71 before the servers effectively are shutting off on me.
Din păcate, doar până la level 71 a ajuns el, dar am observat că mai sunt o grămadă de streameri care au ajuns până la level maxim. Chiar destul de mult. Destul de mulți au ajuns până la level 80.
And because of that is where I had to stop. But the Druid did start to feel pretty good right about where I got to. Love you.
Este un lucru care chiar vreau să-l știu. Dacă merită cu adevărat sau nu merită cu adevărat. Da. Da, rămâne de văzut. O să ne jucăm și noi. În 2 zile, mai exact, o să înceapă nebunia de Diablo 4. Eu cu siguranță o să fac live stream încă din prima zi de la lansare și vă aștept pe toți pe live stream. Dacă v-a plăcut videoclipul, nu uitați să dați un like, un subscribe și ne revedem în continuare în multe alte episoade de acum înainte. O zi bună!